All right, hi guys. All right, so I want to say this because I find it really actually not just sad but kind of scary. Um, excuse me. And I think I might have mentioned this before, but one thing that seems to be the case, I feel like, for a lot of liberals have this extreme emotional response, obviously, to Trump winning the election. And when I say extreme, I actually mean like extreme, but it's like people are in emotional distress, like they feel like their life is over. And I'm like, that's so unhealthy, right? Like, that's unhealthy, not normal way to react. But it's like me, I'm looking at this, observing it, I guess, and just being like, what would cause someone to have such an extreme reaction to that? And I really do think it's because a lot of like liberal media is basically instilling fear into people. You know, if Trump gets elected, your life is going to be over. If Trump gets elected, you're going to lose your rights. If Trump gets elected, you're not going to have this and that. And so they've done nothing but instill fear into all of their supporters. And now that Trump's won, they feel like everything that they said, everything that they were being told is about to happen. Like, there's like, what I feel like is so harmful about that is just like, one, people, it creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of worry, but it also creates a hostile situation because, Trump or people, liberals, I guess I should say, not all liberals, I don't know, the people who are having this extreme reaction, to be specific, feel as though anyone who voted for Trump was like doing so, like personally attack them, right? Like it's no longer just, people have difference of opinions, different perspectives. It's, oh, you didn't vote for who I supported, oh, you're evil and you support all of these horrible things. And I feel like that's so problematic, but I feel like people, the liberals, don't see it the way I feel. Like, I'm independent when it comes to a lot of politics, so I truly feel very unbiased as far as my perspective on things. I'm not right leaning, I am not left leaning, I do not fully support either political party, but I think I mean, I do definitely think the extremism exists on both sides. But I just, like I said, the polarization of political parties is creating nothing but hostility and division within America. And I really wish they would just get away with it, because people feeling as though, someone not voting for their party makes them a horrible person, I feel like it's just not a thought. It's just not healthy, right? But also, I really do think the blame, as far as how I see it, is the media. How the media has made these extreme stances, or has pushed these extreme, consequences, and instilled so much fear. Um, and I definitely think that gets done on both sides to a certain extent. But a lot of people are just not emotionally stable. Like, if I'm looking at the videos I've seen on TikTok or like compilations of people's reactions. And then again, people's inability to see things outside of their self, it makes it hard to understand other people. I can understand both perspectives. I understand the people who vote for Trump. I understand people who voted for Kamala or the people who supported Kamala. So I think, it truly is, they have different perspectives on the same issue, but both equally believe that their perspective is right or is the best. But I personally think, and this is also coming for a perspective of someone who used to be very, like, a lot more liberal leaning, I would say. I never really considered myself like a liberal or Democrat. Like, I never claimed a political affiliation. But I would say in college, was consuming a lot more liberal media, and that all of the media I was getting, liberal media, was what I would say pushed me into some emotional distress. And also, that's part of the reason I don't get on Facebook. Back during when Trump was first elected in 2016, I mean, I could say this because I used to feel that way. Like, I understand because that's how I used to see the world too. And I was consuming all of this media saying Trump is evil and Trump is the devil and Trump is in it. And take away all these things. And it's the end of the world if he gets elected, right? And I remember when he won back in 2016, how sad and like extreme it was. I don't think I cried, maybe, I don't know. But I remember how disappointed I felt about him winning and everything else. And I feel like you have that extreme, I had that maybe a more extreme reaction because I was consuming media telling me, it's the end of the world if he becomes president. He's all of these evil things, right? And then 2016 to 2020, it was not the end of the world. It really wasn't that bad, right? So it's just like they're putting too much focus into just one person being this evil, horrendous person, which I don't believe Trump is the evil, horrendous people I feel like he's painted out to be in liberal media. And I say this only because I stopped watching solely one-sided, biased media. And also, I do definitely think there's a lot of there's a lot of misinformation about a lot of things that he said or did, vice versa. Anyways, I think, the saddest part to me is just like like I said, I think I mentioned this, it's like it's creating just more hostility between people. At the end of the day, it's like it's us versus them now. It's like instead of accepting, the candidate you voted for did not win, it's turning into oh, well, this is war. We're going to fight back. We're going to do all of these things. And I don't know. I just think it's very sad. It's really unhealthy. I think people are allowed to obviously be sad about, how the election went. People are allowed to, be sad that the person they voted for didn't win. Like, I'm not saying you can't be upset, you can't be sad. But what I'm saying is if your reaction is to look at people, anyone who didn't vote the way you voted, or anyone who doesn't have the same perspective or opinion on things, has different perspective, opinions different than yours, and claim that they're horrible people and that they don't deserve, certain things, it's just like, I feel like that's where it becomes, extreme. There's no, what's it called? I forget what it's called in politics, like when people meet in the middle on things. Also, I'm eating ribs. But I think when you live in anxiety or you're living in worry, something I've had to learn to work around, you know, if you're anxious and if you're worried, it's probably about something that hasn't happened yet. It's also probably because you're focused on yourself and your problems. Versus, you know, it's one thing to be concerned about something. And if you're concerned about something, that means something's actually happened, right? Like, I don't know. In order for me to show concern for something, I feel like there has to be an issue present. But some people just, the issue hasn't happened yet. They're worried about the future. They're worried about things that have not actually happened. And I feel like that's very unhealthy. And that's something I'm also working on not doing. But I feel like the political state of our world right now is just very divisive. There's a lot of hatred, there's a lot of animosity. And I don't like it. As someone who has friends who are liberals and has friends who are conservatives, I don't see either side as being inherently good or inherently bad. You know? I personally don't care about someone's political opinions as far as who I will or will not be friends with, because I myself am just not, like I said, I don't center my life around politics. I personally don't. I used to, and that's what I'm saying. Part of the reason I stopped getting on Facebook, like, was because it was driving me actually insane to look at all of the political news, and all it does is just drive fear, instills fear and worry into people. It was so unhealthy. And I personally feel like ignorance, I don't even want to say necessarily being ignorant, but just not hyper focus on all the political things happening in the world that I know I don't have control over. Was very unnecessary. But also, when I was doing that, I was very emotionally unstable. You know, every little thing would make me sad, especially when it came to like the Black Lives Matter thing, you know, and constantly posting about, you know, people being killed by police. That's all to get you angry, to get you upset, to get you in an emotional state. And then people don't realize how manipulative a lot of this stuff is. And I kind of woke up to it. Like, when someone's in an emotional state, they're more susceptible to certain things, but they're also a lot easier to manipulate. When you make someone feel like, I want to say I've talked about it before, but it might be a privated video. But emotional, a form of emotional manipulation kind of is getting someone worked up for something in order to get them to do something you want them to do. So, you know, they shove things down people's throat that they know are going to get an emotional response, an emotional rise out of them in order to get them to do what they want them to do. It's emotional. It's using people's emotions pretty much against them. And so, And I think that's honestly a big reason people feel so strongly emotional about this election, because they've been fed a lot of hyper emotional information that is intentionally to get an emotional rise out of people, an emotional reaction. That person feels unstable, and then that person's more easily controlled. When someone's rationally thinking, they're not easy to control. Which is why I do think, like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with emotions, but being emotional, someone in an emotional state is not thinking rationally. It's almost impossible for someone to make a very rational decision in a emotional state. When people get very angry, they do a lot of things that they might regret. They might break something. They might hurt someone. They might hurt themselves. They might hurt other people, right? It's just like emotions like anger. Now, there's specific emotions I do think God warns us about, and anger is one of them. And the Bible specifically talks about anger being the emotion that gives the devil a foothold over you. He's like, don't allow anger to control you, because that specific emotion gives the devil like a foothold in your life, right? Think about all of the crimes that have been committed. How many of them do you think were committed when someone was angry or when someone was upset? Now, I don't know a lot of sad people committing crimes, but I know a lot of angry people committing crimes, right? Of violence. You know, I was so upset, so I hit someone or punched someone or smacked someone or whatever. You know, people when they're angry don't typically make great decisions. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's people genuinely angry, but angry and emotionally unstable is not a good combination. I mean, like I said, an emotional state, making decisions in an emotional state is not going to typically lead to someone making the best decision for themselves. Which again is why it's really important to have control over your emotions. And that was something I had to learn to have. When I did not have control over my emotions, every little thing would set me off. I would cry all the time. I would be angry about things. It was just like I had no control over myself. And honestly, I do think that was a partial part of the reason I felt depressed, was not having, and I felt like I had no control over my emotions. And I'll be sad, and I couldn't understand why I felt sad, and I hated that I was feeling sad. But instead of, taking control of that and being like, I don't have to feel sad, I can choose to be happy, I can choose to be joyful, I would just allow myself to be like, I would meditate on the sadness, on that sad feeling, and then just, and then it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. So I say this not because I don't understand the people who are upset. It's more so I think the people who are upset don't realize or are not looking at it they're looking at it from a perspective of what they're being told versus what's actually true. But also because what they were told were these extreme things that are going to create emotional responses. And so now that they've been told Trump's going to do Project 2025, Trump's going to do all of these, things that people are scared of. And I would say this: if Trump does end up doing Project 2025, I like what can I honestly, I don't really know what that actually is. I just know people have been telling me to be scared of it. But anyways, I'm not worried about it. And I'm not worried about it because it's not in my control regardless. You know, a lot of these political things, a lot of things that happen in this world are not in your express control. You go out, you vote, you hope the person you want to win wins. But even if they don't win, you can't let that, you know, if you place all of your, I guess, of all of your faith, to say it, is in a political candidate being in power, one, you've made an idol out of that political candidate, but also, you know, that political candidate is not God, is not Jesus. They have limited control and limited power. The president, at the end of the day, is basically a figurehead. Like, they don't have that much power. They make executive orders, but they still have to go through the process, the judicial process, you know, to become law. So it's not like everything just a president wants of just automatically is going to happen. But anyways, I think, again, a lot of people are scared, anxious, worried, and fearful. And I think those are all not things that come from God, for one. And the reason they're afraid and the reason they're scared is because, you know, they put their faith in a political candidate instead of putting their faith in Jesus. Now, I'm not saying putting your faith in Jesus means you never have to go through hard times, but I just think when you do, you ultimately know that God is in control and everything will work out how it's meant to, you know? And I feel like that gives me personally a lot of peace. I don't live my life in constant fear or worry because I'm not putting my faith in political candidates to save the world or to save my livelihood. Like, my faith is in God, my faith is in Jesus. So, you know, I don't have to be scared or worried. Now, does this mean, because y'all see all my videos of me being, you know, stressed at times about certain things, and you know, it's easier said than done at times. There are going to be situations that you find yourself in that can be stressful, and a lot of times there are situations that are out of your control. Situations that you can't control are typically the ones that you worry about the most, right? Like, if people could control it, they wouldn't be fearful of it, which is why I don't worry about things I can't control. You know, that's my solution. But I don't know, people's allowed worry and fear to fester in their minds, and it's like, what good does worrying about something you can't control do? What does that do to you? What does it add to your life? Absolutely nothing. Actually, impacts you negatively, if anything. You know, anxiety and worry and high cortisol and that stress, I can say from my personal experience, you know, messed up my sleep. You know, I had panic attacks, and I feel like I experienced my first panic attack, I think, earlier this year, and I was, you know, I'd never experienced that before, and I was like, this is actually crazy. Like, I would not wish that on anyone. But it's just like, you have a panic over something you can't even control, and your body is having this response to that spike of cortisol, everything, and then your body's trying to regulate your hormones and everything, and it's just all for nothing, basically. And at the end of the day, it doesn't change the thing that you can't control. So, like I said, don't focus on what you can't control. You have to focus on what you can control, and what you can control is yourself. You cannot control other people. You can control how you respond to things. You can control what you say, what you do, how you talk to people, how you treat people. You know, those are the things that matter. But, you know, focusing on things you can't control is not going to help change a situation, because the situation's out of your control. just like when it's just like all the times I've worried about something, it's always been something that I didn't have control over. And it's just like, it always turned out fine in the end. So what did all that worry do for me other than just put me in this emotionally stressed out headspace? And then, it was all worked out fine in the end. And sometimes everything works out fine in the end. It just doesn't always work out the way you want it to. And I feel like that's the part people have to let go of. It's just like things aren't always going to turn out how you want them to. You have to trust God is in control in all situations, even the ones that you feel like should have gone a different way. And I've had to accept that for a lot of situations in my personal life. But yeah, anyways, that was just my thoughts, kind of reaction, because again, I just think it's sad. And it honestly is kind of worrying to me because I'm like, are people that emotionally unstable? Personally, just from the outside looking in, it's emotionally unstable to have full on temper tantrums as an adult. Like I said, I'm not saying you're not allowed to be people can't be disappointed, people can't be upset, but having a temper tantrum, screaming at the top of your lungs, like I mean, screaming, understandable. That's a form of release of whatever. But some of the things people are saying and what they're trying to do, and like, oh, we need to poison men because we don't have control over our bodies, which is just wild. I personally think, again, I've stated my thoughts on the feminist movement and why I don't agree with it, and I do not care for it, I guess. But it's really just, again, it seems like people are just more hostile. I think you can say that both ways. Hostile towards each other, more divided now. It's just like, I don't know. I really just think like you shouldn't gloat. Like you shouldn't gloat just because the person you voted for won either. Like, and rub it in people's faces. Like, you can still show empathy towards people who are feeling upset about the election. I just feel like there's so much, name calling and mean thing. Like, it's just people, like I said, it seems like around politics, people are more divided than ever. And it's just not fun to see. I will say this as someone who does have friends on both sides of the political realm. My conservative friends are a lot more even-tempered. And what I mean by that is, none of my conservative friends have ever said like, oh, I could not be friends with someone who's liberal. But I will say I've seen a lot of posts of my friends who are liberals saying the opposite. Like, anyone who voted for Trump, I don't want to be friends with you. Anyone who voted for, didn't vote for Kamala or didn't do this or didn't do that, like making these very, like, I can't be friends with you and I don't want anything to do with you. So, yeah, that is one thing I personally have observed with friends I have on both sides. So, yeah. Where does that leave us? Where does that leave the world? I don't know, but we need more love. We need more peace. We need people who can just agree to disagree and not hate someone, and people who at least try to understand someone else's perspective. Because I heard someone like a popular YouTuber I follow had said something along the lines of, I don't understand how someone could vote for this person. And I basically was just like, you know, it doesn't take a lot to understand someone else's perspective if you actually are trying to understand, versus just inserting your own opinions or beliefs and bias into that person's, you know, opinion. So that's all I have to say.